On today's show, when your last name is Roach, you probably know how to catch a walleye. When your name is Tony Roach, you might be one of the best. You'll meet him. And it's time to go bald eagle watching again as the Minnesota Bound Eagle Cam is ready for another nesting season.
Let's get corny.
Next, what's wild in the kitchen? Laura Schara has an idea for your St. Patrick's Day menu. And no, it's not green.
Now this is a sandwich.
Our Minnesota Bound Classic this week takes a look back at an Ely legend. She was known as the Root Beer Lady. Those stories and more, next.
Minnesota Bound. Brought to you by Minnesota's select GMC dealers.
Hi everybody, Raven and I welcome you to the show. You know, as we begin the countdown to the fishing season in Minnesota, our thoughts turn to those who can really catch fish. Well, last fall we spent a day with a fishing guide by the name of Tony Roach. And with a last name like that, you just knew he knew how to catch them.
He stands in the bow like a maestro with a fishing rod, keeping the jigging beat to a walleye tune, until it's time to sing like a happy fisherman.
Fish on, look at that walleye, just inhaled that jig.
Look at that one, Ron.
Whoa!
This one has not missed a meal.
I guess not.
That's what I love about fall is they fight so much. They're just putting the feed bag on, it's before winter, and they definitely don't want to miss a meal, especially a shiner coming by.
You could say, play it again, Tony Roach, because when it comes to catching walleyes,
Ooh, nice fish.
Tony Roach plays the tune again and again.
There he is. It just never gets old, Ron.
No, I know.
Every fish is like a new day. Every fish bite's different, every fish is a new experience. How it never gets old.
If Tony's last name rings a bell, it's because he's related to one of Minnesota's most famous fishermen, who calls himself Mr. Walleye, Gary Roach.
Gary's my great uncle. You know, I grew up on a lake and I fished every single day. And, you know, everybody in the Roach family, we fished. We either fished until it was hunting season, then we hunted. But it was just second nature, you know. I just always had that passion, that drive of fishing.
A decade ago, Tony's fishing passion led to a successful guiding business on Mille Lacs, fulfilling his boyhood dreams. But he almost didn't put a line in the water.
It really kind of broke down, you know, pros and cons of what I was currently doing, which I had a great job. But also then I broke down what my passion was, and that was fishing and being on the water every day possible. It took a little convincing from my wife, but then she knew that eventually I would be doing this anyways.
Tony's nose for fish is something called experience.
What's the most fascinating thing you found out about walleyes?
It's just the unpredictability of walleyes. You know, 1 minute they're the most aggressive predator fish that you can catch, and then it seems like the very next minute they're so finicky and you almost got to finesse them.
Have you found that they're not always where they're supposed to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think my Uncle Gary coined the phrase, fish don't read books.
Well, I think that's the fascination of fishing is like solving a puzzle every day.
Solving the puzzle isn't always easy, especially on the hands. But then his fishing hand heats up.
There's one right here. Beauty.
My wife says it's a disease, but I think it's beyond that. It's just something that drives me. I can't really put my finger on it. It's like a switch. I never necessarily lose confidence, but I've always been a competitive type of person, and so I just try to, you know, maintain that level of professionalism, and just, you know, you've got to understand in the back of the mind, the back of my mind, that I'm going to have a bad day every once in a while.
Speaking of bad days, the fella in the back of the boat was having a really, really bad day.
I have not had a bite. Check my bait, I think. I lost it. I did. Shiners. Smut-tail shiners. That's a filet mignon to a walleye.
I must have overcooked my filet mignon. Meanwhile, the maestro, yes, the maestro, kept playing the walleye music. And the walleye music plays on.
I just feel blessed to live in northern Minnesota where I can fish all the time.
Still ahead, some Minnesota Eagles, and Minnesota Bound once again will bring you live webcam action. Don't miss what's happening up in the nest.
Minnesota Bound, brought to you by Minnesota Select GMC dealers. Connecticut. Seven Clans Casino. And by Starkey Hearing Technologies.
Welcome back. It seems like our fascination with our national emblem, bald eagles, knows no end. With that thought in mind, I'm here to announce that our Minnesota Bound Live Eagle Cam is on the web one more time. You can tune in and watch on mnbound.com, and we'll see the life and times of bald eagles in Minnesota.
In 1782, when Congress chose the bald eagle as America's national emblem, who would guess that more than 2 centuries later, we'd be addicted to watching real eagles live on a computer screen? Since the Minnesota Bound Live Eagle Cam hit the internet 5 years ago, upwards of 5 million folks a season have peeked into the life and times of eagles, raising their eaglets in a nest of sticks high atop a tree near Hutchinson, Minnesota. Call it nature raw. The camera's bird's eye view of the nest sometimes show what's on the menu, fishy fish or furry critters. Eventually, eggs hatch and baby eagles then occupy their stick home, looking oh so fragile and helpless. Speaking of helpless, high drama took place during the nesting season of 2012 when one eaglet fell out of the nest and perished, while a second suffered a leg injury. Should we let nature take its course? Viewers who had named the young bird Harmon said no. So, to the rescue came a crew from the Raptor Center at the University of Minnesota.
Hey buddy, what you got there? You got a whole mess of stuff here. Okay, my friend. Yeah, I know that was a rough ride, but it's okay. It's okay. Hopefully a couple of days at the spa and some good food and clean them up to get the maggots off. We will have a kid that looks altogether different. Comfy spot.
Quickly, the Raptor crew fixed the wing and returned Harmon to the nest. But then the question was, would the parents return? After 24 hours and no sign of Mom and Pop Eagle, all hope was fading. When the parents returned and reunited with their lone surviving young. And they lived happily ever after. But the story doesn't end there, because Minnesota Bound will again bring you the life and times of a bald eagle family, thanks to Mark Wegscheid from Broadband Corporation.
This is a mount we made that the camera will go in. We haven't had this before. So we're gonna load all this up into the boom and head up.
Head up to an eagle's nest to mount, shall we say, a spy camera on the feathered occupants when they return for the spring nesting season. So what lies ahead for the 2015 year of the Minnesota Bound Eagle Camp? Only nature knows. To find out, simply click on mnbound.com. What the Eagles don't know is millions of us, once again, will be watching nature's own Eagle soap opera.
Corned venison Reuben today?
Next up, Laura Schara is getting wild in the kitchen with a new recipe that's perfect for a St. Patrick's Day feast. How about a little corned venison?
So we have the bread.
Closed captioning is brought to you by the Yard.
Time now to go wild in the kitchen. Daughter Laura Schara tells me this venison recipe you're about to see is the best ever in the woods.
Today we're using the luck of the Irish to get wild in the kitchen, and I'm here with Chef Paul from Firelight Grill House and Cocktail Bar. And Chef Paul, we are making a corned venison Reuben today?
Yes, we're going to empty that freezer, all those, that meat that you stored. We got the perfect thing to do with it.
That's right, because some of us may be tired of eating venison sticks, right? So we're going to do a different process, and we start with brining a venison leg.
Yes, it's a very straightforward process. It's a few simple ingredients. First, kosher salt, brown sugar, pickling spice, your favorite beer. It can be a simple lager. The key component is the pink salt, Cell Rouge, Prague powder #1. It's known as all three of those ingredients. That's the key component. Follow directions exactly like they're printed online. Right off the website, you can print this recipe.
All right, let's get corny. All right, so brining is actually the corning process.
Yes, we're all familiar with corned beef. This is a leg of venison, just boned out. And we had it in the brine for 8 days. Then we lifted it out, stirred it, and then put it back in the brine for 4 more days. So this is day number 8. So all we're going to do here is we're just going to take out our brined corned venison. All you want to do is rinse it quickly, and then we're going to set it down in our pot. We're putting our coriander seeds, some allspice, some bay leaves, and some chili arbol.
The most important ingredient.
Most important ingredient, because this is St. Patrick's Day, we are going to put Guinness beer. Anything cooked in beer tastes better.
Oh, yes, it does.
And then the last step, we're just going to add enough water to the pot to cover it. Now we're going to just put it on the stove. We're just going to bring it up to a simmer. Then we're going to lower it to low, cover, and you're going to cook it for about 2.5 to 3 hours until it's tender.
Okay, our corned venison is complete.
Yep, we had it on the stove for about 2.5 hours. I chilled it in its broth. Now it's ready to go. It has that distinct color, nice and tender. Here is some that we prepared earlier, and you can see it has that unique corned color. And now we're gonna make our Reuben sandwich for St. Patty's Day.
Let's do it.
We're gonna start off with a little oil on the grill. This cheese is from Eichton's Farms. Then we're gonna wanna take our corned venison and saute it up, get it nice and hot. While that's heating on one side of the grill, we're gonna put our sauerkraut and our Russian dressing or Thousand Island dressing. Doesn't have to cook too long. You don't want to dry out the meat. So we have the bread nice and toasted, the hot corned beef.
Look at this. Now this is a sandwich, yes? I'm gonna take a bite. Very good. Once again, Chef Paul, so delicious, and this is one wild St. Patty's Day Reuben.
Still ahead, we're heading down memory lane with an Ely legend, Dorothy Moulter, also known as the Root Beer Lady.
Minnesota Bound is brought to you by Tracker Boats and by Rapala.
Time now for a Minnesota Bound Classic, and in case you're new to Minnesota, there was a lady who lived in the boondocks around Ely, Minnesota, who was known as the Root Beer Lady. Well, her legend lives on.
She lived a life in Mother Earth's garden. Her neighborhood was made of islands. Her neighbors were wild critters. And if there was a neighborhood ruckus, it was usually made by loons. This was Dorothy Moulter's way of life, a life spent living alone in a wilderness cabin on Knife Lake, deep in the heart of the BWCA, Minnesota's Boundary Waters Canoe Wilderness Area.
She was just finishing up nursing school, right out of Chicago, and didn't know anything about the North Country. But she was just fascinated by the whole thing, just absolutely fascinated.
Dorothy Moulter became an unusual icon of the wilderness. Visitors came to the BWCA to seek solitude, but also to visit Dorothy.
She liked people. She wanted to share her feelings for the Boundary Waters and for the wilderness area that she was living in.
A national magazine once wrote that Dorothy was the loneliest woman in the world.
She just hooted over that because she kept a logbook in there, and we have it up at the museum now. And she had between 5,000 and 6,000 visitors a year. She said loneliest, she said, I'm probably the least loneliest woman in the world.
To thirsty canoeists and anglers, she also became known as the root beer lady. Using water direct from Knife Lake, Dorothy would make 10,000 to 12,000 bottles of her tasty root beer every summer. Limit 2 per person.
Living in such a rustic setting might seem romantic to most of us, but life was not always easy for Dorothy Moulter. Sometimes she worried about her food supply. There's one story about the day she took her deer rifle, found a wolf-killed deer, scared away the wolves, helped herself to a quarter of the deer, and left the rest for the wolf pack.
And she did have bears that came near, but she always had her gun nearby. And I think she had the feeling that she could take care of herself.
But Dorothy was not a recluse.
Oh, no. And she came out, in the winter, she usually came out for a month or more. She was very complex, and to try to simplify her was very difficult because there was a lot of facets to Dorothy. She, one thing about her which is very interesting, she had large hands, extremely large hands. Well, those hands that could take an axe and split wood with anybody could also set the leg, a broken leg on a chickadee. I've seen her do it.
And Dorothy had a dry sense of humor, much of it told as hints to her visitors.
She liked to laugh a lot, and she liked stories, but she couldn't stand complainers. And she got a lot of them that would show up there. You know, the weather was bad, or the big one was, of course, too many people. Of course, everybody figures the other people are too many people. It isn't them that's too many people, you know, so it's kind of funny. And she would listen to this for a little bit, and she'd say, well, if you don't think you're getting what you should out of life, you're probably getting what you deserve. She'd cut him right off at the knees.
One day in December of 1986, Dorothy didn't respond to a radio call.
They found her near the wood stove. She had just put wood in the stove, and so that's where they found her.
At the age of 79, the root beer lady was gone. But her memory lives on, and now in an Ely museum, visitors still come to her cabin.
Her winter cabin, we have tried to reproduce it almost as it were as if she was still living in it. We have her bed, we have her dining room table, we have all the furniture in there is furniture that she had. We even have her own clothing that she wore, and people come and they say, I remember Dorothy in that shirt.
She would probably be appalled. Dorothy never wanted any kind of a monument or memorial or anything. She figured when she was gone, that was it. She was a part of the woods and she'd vanish with it. But people couldn't let that die. There were just too many people loved that woman and figured this is a piece of history and this is somebody who should be remembered.
The local folks say the Knife Lake canoe route isn't as popular as it used to be, and there's only one good reason why. Dorothy isn't there anymore.
The root beer lady. Don't know why, but it seems the wilderness around Ely produces all kinds of interesting characters. Well, that about does it for us. Remember, introduce a kid to the great outdoors. I'm Ron Schara, and of course, always the star of the show. Who's a little antsy today is Raven.
Transportation provided by Premier Transportation. Call 1-800-899-7433. For more information on these stories and more, catch us on the web at mnbound.com.